Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, Said No One Ever. I am your host, Chananya Abraham. I am so excited to share with you an awesome conversation I just had with Kirsten, who specializes in teens and young adults, has an awesome camp that she offers. And this is a conversation that really is near and dear to my soul, being a therapist that works primarily with teenagers and young adults. Being able to have a conversation with someone that gave some just refreshing answers when it comes to dealing with resilience, technology, failure. There's so many awesome little tidbits, and we could probably make tons of TikToks just on the small little tidbits that Kirsten gave us. But I hope you enjoy this awesome conversation with Kirsten regarding our teenagers, how to deal with resilience, how to deal with failure, how to deal with technology, and how to deal with the healthy balance at home, and also being valuable as parents, something that we all need to be a little more and a little better about. So enjoy this conversation. I look forward to hearing more from you guys soon. As always, please like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this. Please post a comment below, and don't forget to email us for any questions, concerns, comments, or maybe future ideas to parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. That is parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. So, Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us. And I think this is something that was a long time coming between us and also for this podcast, because I think the topic, talking about teenagers and especially outdoors and camps and stuff, is there's so many different areas that we can explore when we talk about these topics. But I'm curious to hear from you. And what have you seen be so most beneficial when it comes to teenagers and being outdoors, and how it could be something that could be so growth for them, but also, and they're being in that environment, but also for their families?
I think that one of my biggest observations is that teenagers need a lot of time doing things face to face, in person, and using their bodies. Because we live in an age where a lot of things are done virtually. And this gives them this sort of false sense of knowing something or having experienced something. But when they actually do something in their body, when they go canoeing rather than watching a video of someone going canoeing, or when they climb a tree or set up a tent rather than watching or hearing about it or reading about it, they experience it in a way that really builds confidence. And I think the benefit to the family is that when you have confident teenagers, they're happier. They're experiencing less anxiety, less depression. And so the more opportunities that we as parents or educators, or people who care about teens can give them to do things with their bodies to build confidence and responsibility, the happier they are and the happier we are.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the way you're saying also that there's a confidence, which I think is important, that we're trying to have some sort of growth and organically inside each one individually. And anyone that has multiple children will know that not all teenagers are the same. So trying to have that balance of realizing, okay, they need this outdoors, or they need this. It could be really, really, really difficult. And I think when you're building that confidence like you're talking about, it goes so far, because then that happiness also spreads. Obviously that applies to parents as well, and how we go about dealing with things. And obviously one of the biggest obstacles, and we could probably spend a very long time on this, but just like a few specific questions regarding technology and the role that it plays within families itself. I'm curious to hear from you, and knowing that there's so many different ways of dealing with and using technology for its benefits. What are some of like the unique ways that you found to use technology in a way where it could be healthy for the teenager and maybe for the family unit overall?
I think with my kids and then with the kids that I work with, I really encourage them to remember that technology is a tool. And it has so many. I really try not to demonize it, because then I've lost them. As soon as I say you can't use this, then you've lost them. So to really focus on how can we use these computers, these phones, any of our devices as tools. How can we use them for photography, for video editing, for programming? How can we use them to be creators instead of just consumers? And this empowers kids, again, to do something that is going to build confidence, and add to their marketable skills later on in life. But also having that conversation on a regular basis just sort of sets the stage for like, how do I want to be spending my time? Do I want to be spending my time creating something that is bringing value to me and the people around me, or do I want to simply be consuming, which doesn't really bring value to anyone except for maybe the creator you're consuming from. And so again, it goes back to that confidence thing.
Yeah, and I love how it's keep it going back there, because I think it's confidence is key when it comes to trying to raise our teenagers. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm taking away from what you're saying is it's a constant conversation. Meaning the way you're going to be dealing with it with your young adult and your tween is going to be different than when you're dealing it with your 15, 16, or 18-year-old. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really important thing for parents to talk about, and that's something that I talk about in my office a lot. Dealing with a lot of teenagers is that it is constant, and what's new today is very, very old in a couple of months from now. So just being on top of what's happening, and I think a big part of this as well, if we're trying to give over a message to our kids, is also obviously the modeling that we give over to our kids. So what would be some of the things that you would talk about with parents regarding making sure that they're modeling technology and maybe overall behaviorals when it comes to things that they need to deal with, so that they can deal with things properly with their kids?
Yeah, I think this is the piece that makes parents sometimes willing to overlook their teen screen time usage because they don't want to deal with the fact that if they ask their teen to get off their phone, then they actually need to do it too, because teens are super smart and they're watching what you're doing more than listening to what you're saying. And
Mm.
so the modeling piece, it's number one, it's cognitive, whereas they see and they're consciously thinking about what, oh, is my parent doing, what are they practicing, what they preach? Are they doing what they say they want me to do? But then the other part of it is actually in their nervous system. When we are present with them and paying attention to them and listening to them and engaging with them without our technology being a part of that or blocking that or distracting us from that, they feel it deep in their bodies and in their nervous system, that the gift of having us be present with them. And that's something that is so much more powerful than what we say, because it's we are then not only modeling the making them, it's not just, oh, they feel good when we listen, but we are also setting the stage for what their expectations are for how their friends should treat them, what their expectations are for how their future partners will treat them, and how they will treat their friends and their future partners. Basically saying that if someone is important to you, you're present with them. You are fully engaged, you
Right.
are fully listening, and there is no piece of technology or screen that is more important than the person you're present with. Because we can talk about it until we're blue in the face. But if we are saying one thing and then doing another, they will never, ever believe us. And they will never, ever have the experience of
Yeah.
what it's like to have someone be present and be present with them, which is becoming rarer and rarer in this modern age of technology moving faster and faster, and it's the most precious gift we can give them.
For sure, for sure. And using the word gift a few times over here, I think that's something that sometimes we don't even realize the gift that we have until it's like a little bit too late, especially when it comes to something like relationships. And I think if we're trying to give it over to our kids, they might not have a enjoyment or a dopamine rush from this conversation we're having after dinner about the presidential elections, or something else that is important to them that we might not have that much of an interest in, but because it means something to them, we're having that conversation, and that's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be something that they're going to gain from right this second, but because of the fact that we're keeping the door open and they can know that we can come in, they can come and go within this house, so to speak, as much as they want, and they're building that autonomy. It's so hard for them to sort of have a balance, because they're learning the concept of autonomy, independence, for the first time as they become teenagers. And it's like, how do I figure this out? How do I navigate? But if you have those relationships, those physical connections, those conversations, that's helping to build who they are, which is then helping to build confidence, then it's creating that healthy way of going about things. And obviously technology being one of, if not the biggest hindrance to that. But at the same time, I think there could obviously be a benefit to it. And I think nowadays, in order to deal with it properly, it has to be embraced and has to be used in a way where there are many positives when it comes to using technology. But I'm curious to hear from you regarding, are there certain misconceptions that are involved when it comes to technology and a child development, and how would you go about dealing with parents that are, I guess I could say, too much to the way where no, this is never ever happening in this house, and having them see that there is something that could be done with this in a positive way? How would you talk to parents about that?
Well, I think it's like anything. I think it is healthier to teach kids how to use it as a tool and to use it in moderation than to forbid it completely, because then you're setting them up sort of for like binge usage once they do get it. Having conversations and modeling and putting boundaries around teaching them how to use it healthily. It's sort of like, if a child is never ever ever exposed to or allowed to eat unhealthy food, then there is the
Exactly.
possibility that when they're around a bowl of candy, they're going to go crazy and be like, I want all of it. Or when they go to a friend's house and their parents aren't around, that they will overindulge. It's a similar type of thing. It's a human nature thing. Whereas if they are allowed access, but in limited quantities, or with a high awareness around what kinds of activities are safe, and the parents are involved and having a lot of communication around it, then they can develop healthy, age appropriate habits
Hmm.
to do with the technology, rather than it being an all or nothing kind of thing. Because as human beings, as soon as something is forbidden to us, it's like the secret forbidden fruit. And I've
Exactly.
talked to so many families that kids end up, they're not allowed to have something, and then they end up having it and hiding and lying about it, rather than having these open communication with their parents, which ultimately, having open communication is going to prevent way, way more problems down the line.
Immensely. I mean, there's so much to unpack for everything you were saying. What came up for me, the first thing that came up to me was growing up in a home without a television for obvious purposes. I think there's a certain level of me going to friends' houses and then needing to watch more than play with my friends because of that, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then, as I see as I've gotten older and having, some of my kids having friends that are not allowed certain foods in their house, and most of them that come over and they're like, kid in the candy store for the first time ever. And there's that level of needing to have moderation, which I think is really hard to teach. But I think one of the best ways to teach is to be able to model it and be able to say, you know what, I have a time and a place and a way to go about doing this thing. And if I'm going to work on, or if I'm going to be teaching you the concept of having a balance and moderation when it comes to technology, which there are many benefits to it, so then I have to model it myself. And I think that was one of the big takeaways I took away from what you were just saying. When it comes to a child watching their parent do certain things, I think there's a level of, oh, okay, so there is a way to go about having a healthy connection with it. But parents might overlook that because they want to have more time. Now, I do think there's a place, and we can argue about what, when, where, and how, where a technology can be used as a babysitter for younger kids and put something on to watch so that parents can cook dinner, do the laundry that they have no other opportunity to do, obviously within moderation. And it has to be done structurally. It has to be done in a way where, I would say one of the things that I talk about with parents is make sure it's being done in an open room. So if you're giving it to young kids, it has to be in front of you. It can't just be privately in the room upstairs all alone. And it's only for certain times, and it's only after certain things are done, and also knowing that there can be certain things you're gonna have to do afterwards. So when there's structure set around with it, I think that's something that could be really, really helpful. Has there been something that you have found to be like a key, or something that you got guide parents to regarding when we're setting up structure to make sure that they're staying on track, but more importantly, having the child know that there's a track, but yet letting them have the independence on their track?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is helping parents just be intentional about how they're doing it, because different sort of systems around screen time are going to work different for different families, depending on the age of the child, what kind of device or screen they're using. what responsibilities are expected in the home. But all of the things you mentioned are all things that we employ in my house with my kids. I have 5 kids, and at different ages and stages, they are allowed different amounts of screen time based on if they're old enough that they can be using it as a tool or doing research or creative product projects. Are their chores and homework done? We always recognize it's a privilege too. So if it appears that screen time is affecting your attitude and your ability to be
Ah,
a loving and respectful member of the household, then we can remove that. If that is causing a problem for you, no problem, we can remove it. Basically, screen time is for in our house, we just, like, screen time is for the people whose chores are done, whose homework is done, and who are being loving, kind members of the household. And if any of those are missing, I'm sorry, it seems like you're going to have to find another activity.
yeah, which I think is hard because they look at it as that this is the only thing I could do, especially where I think where we both are now. There's a lot of cold weather, and just saying, well, there's nothing else for me to do. Okay, well, let's figure it out. I mean, that's not something that it's either this or nothing type thing, and it can be hard.
One of the things that my kids don't love it when I say this, but they'll be like, "I'm so bored. There's nothing to do. I want to play my iPad," and I'm like, in order to get to the point to create good art, write good music, invent new board games, read new books, you have to be bored first. Your brain needs boredom for creativity. So I'm so glad that you have this opportunity to reach that point of boredom, because you'll never be a creator in the world and contribute things to the world if you don't hit boredom first. So you're welcome.
Well, I think that's a much better response. I just tell my kids, well, go outside and count the grass. If you're that bored, just go count it, because there is no screen time right now. It's too
Right.
early, and
I'm sure my kids feel the same way. They probably feel like I just told them to go count the grass. But
yeah, but I guess there's a certain level of understanding where they're coming from. It's like, okay, I hear you. Oh, fine. So let me do something with you. I know this is something that in his book Irresistible, Adam Alter, who's a professor in NYU, talks about this concept of internet and gaming addiction. And he says also that being able to have a certain retention of information, especially if there are many different types of programs out there on screens that could be beneficial and could be helpful. But if we're doing it in a way where we're watching together with, or we're doing something with the child, and we pause it to process what's being said, whether it's a simple please and thank you to a certain historical event of a documentary. When we sit with them, when we pause and we talk it out, the retention of that information can be, I think it's up to 6 times more and longer than if they're just watching something and memorizing something. So,
mm-hmm.
there is something to be said regarding using technology properly. And if we're doing it together with them, and even if it's like, I'm so bored, okay, fine. So let's watch one of those documentaries that you find so boring, but we could learn a lot of stuff from, and we could be curious about and see maybe, okay, so what can we do about it? The Wright brothers did one type of plane. What can you do differently from the toys that you have? And just creating that world. I think creating that positive affiliation with it. When we talk about technology, and I think something that you talk about, or the research that you've done regarding the mental health, I don't want to call it a pandemic, but I get to the mental health aspect that comes together with technology can be really, really difficult to sort of dive into and sort of have an overall grasp on. But I'm curious from like your perspective, more importantly from like a developmental perspective, like what do you think is at stake if we are going to not address the issue when it comes to technology from the societal levels?
I believe, and all of the research points to the fact that kids need to be learning things with their bodies and in person and face to face. So, technology is not a bad thing. However, it has a high experiential cost if it is replacing too much time that kids should be doing these other things.
Mm-hmm.
So for every hour of the day that a kid is in front of the TV or the iPad or on their phone, that is an hour of the day that is not spent reading, writing, playing music, practicing an instrument, riding their bike, dancing, playing hide and seek, climbing a tree, moving their bodies, talking to friends. And so once or twice or a little bit here and there is really not a big deal. watching a movie once a week or whatever. But when you look at the cumulative time that is average for kids, let's just say in North America, kids are spending 5 to 7 hours a day of screen time. They're basically spending the vast majority of their time in front of screens. And so the opportunity experiential cost of all the things they're not doing in that time is fundamentally altering their brain development. And so their social and emotional skills are suffering from that. Their ability to focus and even be able to enjoy doing something that doesn't give them constant dopamine hits is suffering. Their ability to sit down and read a book or write a story or a letter, or even play a board game, all of those things become unenjoyable because it's not giving them the constant stimulation that screen time gives them.
Right.
And so the opportunity cost that happens over the course of months and years is completely changing the way their brains develop. And the rates of anxiety and depression have skyrocketed since having screens has become such a commonplace thing. And since most teenagers now, preteens, are carrying little screens around in their pocket, they can be on them pretty much constantly unless there are some sort of boundaries or limits put on that. And it's changing their childhood.
Oh, big time, big time. It's very much changing, and I think that in itself is, there's so much to unpack and everything you're saying over there, Kirsten. So I guess my first question is, when people are coming to you and saying, the issues they might be having, whether it's behavioral or mental health, are there certain guidelines that you have regarding talking to people regarding when parents should be giving a child a phone, and like what are the guidelines or parameters that you would set with that as you're having those conversations?
Every family is different, but what the scientists and the research are saying now is that if you can put off giving a smartphone, not a regular phone, like the old fashioned phones that just talk and text for kids
Flip
to take
phone.
and be able to, the flip phones for kids to be able to just call to get a ride home, or to text their mom to be like, okay, practice is going to be done at 4:30, or those kinds of things. Those don't seem to have any significant impact on mental health or development. It's the smartphones that are having the biggest impact. And so, what the research is saying is that if you can delay a smartphone until age 14, there's a really critical period of development between ages 11 and 14 of social emotional development where kids really, really need to be present, to be focused, and to not have that distraction. So delaying it even to age 14 will make a massive difference in their social emotional
Yeah.
development. And if possible, delaying the use of social media like Instagram and TikTok until ages 15 or 16.
Yeah, I
And different
agree with that.
families are going to approach that differently, but I'm just relaying what the research is saying.
Yeah, I think it's dead on with how I know I go about it in my practice and talking about it. I think one of the most, I guess I could say, powerful, but yet also most hardest to find ways to have some sort of filter, pardon the pun, when it comes to doing these things properly within different ages, is community. And when there's a community there that is all together, whether it's a class of the sixth grade girls, or and or some other age or situation where it's people coming together and saying we're going to do this for our children, I found that has been like the ultimate superpower in a certain way when it comes to dealing with things, and something that I advocate and I talk about a lot in my room. I got originally from one of my mentors, Leonard Sachs, who has written a lot about this stuff and communication in general. But I think the concept of being able to say, well, this community, we don't do this. So you can't come back and say, all my friends have, no, because actually I know they don't. They all have flip phones. So if you want a flip phone that has texting, no problem. For your 13th birthday, that's what you're going to get, or whatever it is. I think setting that up in a way where the things that you're doing together as a unit, not just a family unit, but it goes really far. And I would go as far as to say is that if there's a situation where a child is going to start feeling alienated and left out because We don't believe you should be any cell phones before the age of you get your license. So then this kid's going to feel completely not connected to anyone else. And what's that going to do to their social emotional growth and development over their early and very, very important teenage years? So that comes into play as well. And it's, I think, probably the most difficult part to get at finding a community, whether it's finding it through a school, through the area that you live, Facebook, and having some community where that your kids are a part of as well. It's not just about your community; it's about the community your kids are a part of, and doing it in a way where we're all in this together, and no one can fold. I'm curious, based off of this, is there something you would recommend, or is there a way that people can foster that the community feel that will be able to, I guess you could say, keep things as calm and as quiet when it comes to social media and technology as possible?
Yeah, I think everything you just said is super, super important because everything is easier done in community when there's some accountability and that you're not alone, and especially for kids because this is the age where they desperately want to be like their friends and to be cool and to be fit and to fit in. And so I think the younger we can start having, the younger the kids are when parents start having these conversations, the more time there is to talk to their friends. If you can talk to your the parents of your kids, your kindergarten kids' friends, you have a way head start on being able to say, like, can we commit? There's a program or an organization called Wait Till Eighth, which is it's a classroom initiative where people can go on and sign a pledge form at the Wait Till Eighth website, and they will get some information, and they will basically be given information to promote it in their child's class. And the goal is to get a minimum of 10 people in a child's class to all sign this pledge that they'll wait to give a smartphone till 8th grade. And I think it's just utterly brilliant because they're also sent educational information. They're sent suggestions for how to talk to kids, and then knowing, and you get a list. It's not published publicly, but within that class, the parents all get a list of all the other parents and kids that have made that pledge of wait till 8th. And so when their kids come to them and say, well, everyone else has a smartphone, they can be like, well, look, it looks like Sarah and Mason and John and Avery are all, none of them get a cell phone to their 8th. It's kind of like, oh yeah, okay. And so having that in our local community, in the community of teens that I work with, we don't have a specific rule about, oh, no cell phones here, but we do have a lot of talk about, like, when we're in the spaces, like, remember to be present. Like, we're here at this activity, like, we're here to be with our friends. We're here to be present. If you're going to pull your phone out, please be using it as a tool. Be taking photos, be taking videos.
Using a timer.
If you're going to share, using a timer, sharing your music. Those things are great. We encourage those usage, but don't ever let your cell phone be something that's blocking you from connection with your friends. Like, we are here to be present. And so it's a constant conversation reminder, and it's not in a negative way. We're basically reminding them how important their friends are.
For sure. And their physical friends, and putting them in the place of having that authentic connection, other words that I like to use, and which is obviously something when you're having that authentic connection, it's going to be really hard for teens. And I'm curious, what role and how can parents foster that authentic connection, especially in situations where that social media or that phone use is more rampant?
I think having those sort of standards in our households makes a big difference. So, for example, my daughter's 14. She just got Instagram, but the limit on her phone for her total usage for the day is 45 minutes. Besides sending messages, which she might need to send for, and so she has to choose when and how she wants to use that 45 minutes. And so that is, I'm not sharing that is the perfect way to do it. That's sort of the compromise our family made, because she had several friends that was the Instagram was the only way that she could connect with them and message them. So she ended up getting a little earlier than we were planning, because again, we want her using it for communication. We want to foster connection and her ability to be able to say, hey, we want to go to the mall later and meet up, and being able to use it for communication. But we do have a lot of talks about how she's going to most positively use that time each day. And with that being the case, when friends come over, we try to make sure that there's just lots of things that are more engaging than being on their phones. We have a great big board game collection. We live in a really cool place where there's hiking available, and we my daughter loves to cook, so I try to make sure if her friends are coming over that there's lots of great ingredients for baking cookies or homemade french fries or whatever it is that she's wanting to make with them. I try to make sure that there's stuff for them to do that is going to be more engaging than them sitting and scrolling on their phones together.
I think that's a really good point of, it's not just about telling your kids we can't do certain things, but it's sort of, this is what you can do instead, and showing them and fostering for them, and creating that sense of, all right, I hear you. And you like cooking, so here's the ingredients. You like doing certain things, let's go get new hiking shoes, and just creating that environment where it's not just there's nothing to do. There's maybe the things that you like to do of you being lazy and just watching something is right here, but there are other things to do. Let me show you. And by leading, which is what we were talking about before regarding that modeling, it goes really, really far. I feel so fortunate. My wife and I feel so fortunate living in a community where I have a daughter that's a junior in high school. And from what we understand, from all 18 girls, not a single one has a smartphone because the school doesn't allow it. And it's
Amazing.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable that we have that opportunity to be in that. So it's not. There's no peer pressure for it. And I have a son that's a freshman now, and he has his first cell phone, and it's very restricted. We bought a phone that is restricted, so there is no internet base. Maybe a few apps that he needed music wise, and a few other small things. But we're setting them up, hopefully, to be in a place where yes, you can use this, and yes, you have access to the things that you need, and there's also a limit, so it doesn't have to be off to the races right away. And I have to credit the community, because I think that it goes so far when it comes to us being able to have our way and our structure that we want to have at home. There's nothing to say regarding how I want to go about things if the peer pressure in a way is also coming from the community. And therefore my battle is so much less when it comes to it. Now, I think also in the home, one of the hard parts can also be if different kids need different things. So if there's hey, when I was 8 years old, I only got 15 minutes. Why does he get 30 minutes? Which everyone can take that conversation and apply it to any two ages from any two kids, whether they're 19 and 9 or anything else in between. I'm curious, when you're talking to people, how do you go about creating or having parents foster that balance and treating each child for what they need, as opposed to having a blanket rule that could be a little more difficult to keep to for certain kids?
Yeah, I mean, you really can't have a blanket rule because different kids are
Yeah,
different. They're using technology. Some kids are way more prone to just want to play video games all the time, whereas some kids are way more prone to sit and want to do programming. And so what they're using, I think that's a parenting question in general. Like how do you make sure that your kids are
for sure.
being parented in a way that fits their personalities and their individual needs? In our family, we've actually, the 8-year-old actually gets way less screen time than his bigger brothers did, because as parents, we know better and do better. And so every kid, every kid is benefiting from the things we've learned. I'm not sure if the 8-year-old would consider it benefiting, but he has hardly any screen time because he simply doesn't need it. And of all the kids, he is the most creative and the most likely to be doing art and making his own board games and inventing, making inventions and stuff. And so sometimes even the bigger kids will be like, oh, come on, mom, when I was his age, I got to play 30 minutes a day. And I'm like, well, when you were his age, you weren't an inventor. So it's all evening out, it's fine.
Yeah, and I think to your point, when you have a child that is feeling good about how they're parented, then since their glass is full, they're not looking at anyone else's. So if they see things going for what they need, then it becomes, and they're content with that. And we teach contentness, which I think is very hard to teach personally. when they see there someone else in the family getting something different, it becomes less like hey, how come they get blank? Because there's a certain level of, oh, I'm good where I am. Which again, I think is one of the hardest things in parenting is creating that balance where everyone is happy with what they have and need, even though it might be very very different. From educational to to behavioral to gadgets. I think that's something that could be. It's really important for us to be able to have a balance, but yet also make sure that no one else is. It feels like it's a competition, which I would say is a lifelong thing as a parent that we're supposed to be dealing with.
Yeah.
Um, you in general, I think one of the things that I really took away from knowing the work that you do. You talk a lot about the concept of building relationships through resilience, and obviously we talk about technology for a lot, and there's a lot of resilience that comes with technology. But I think that overall, there's obviously a feeling and a certain character that comes with that resilience that we can build within ourselves, and how that through shared experiences is something that can really benefit the growth of a child. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, how that's something that we could create within the home environment if we're not in a setting like a camp or some other group?
Sure. So studies have shown that kids who have responsibilities in the home and who are given a certain level of independence, age appropriate independence, build more confidence and resilience. And the way this kind of interconnects is that, say, a child is given the responsibility of cooking dinner once a week. And that's their job. They have to let you know what ingredients they need, and then you get the ingredients for them. And then obviously with whatever it depends on an age appropriate thing,
Sure.
they have to make that meal. They, in that experience, they are building the confidence to make the list, prepare the ingredients, cook the items, and serve the meal. But there's also the risk of failure. And sometimes they're going to prepare a meal that is going to get burned, or they're going to put tablespoons of salt instead of teaspoons, or something's going to go wrong and they're going to fail. And resilience is often built through the opportunity to fail, because kids who never have
Say
the
that again,
opportunity,
please. Say that again. I need people to hear that.
resilience is built through kids having the opportunity to fail.
Beautiful.
Because kids who never have the opportunity to fail become afraid and anxious, and failure is built up as this big thing. If I fail, it's the end of the world. And kids need both the chance of failing and sometimes succeeding, and the chance of failing and sometimes failing, and feeling what it feels like when the world doesn't end.
And that's
If
okay.
Yeah, and it's okay because you learn from it, you grow from it, you bounce back. The next time, like with the example of the cooking, you make the tablespoon, teaspoon salt mistake one time, and you're never going to make that mistake for the rest of your life. You pay attention to those kinds of things. And it's so important for them to have the opportunity to do things in a low stakes environment. Ruining dinner once in a while is so low stakes, but the amount of times that they do it right, the confidence building is so great. And if they fail once or twice, it's okay, because they know that they've done it right before and that they can do it right again. But parents who protect their kids from failure at all costs are robbing them of the opportunity to be resilient. They're robbing them of the opportunity to build confidence. And they will end up with young adults who are too anxious to try anything. And this is actually, equally along with any of the social media or screen time, this is actually a really really huge challenge in this age of kids right now, is that parents, through well-meaning and loving their kids,
Ah,
they protect them so much that the kids do not have the opportunity to practice responsibility, independence, and have the opportunity to fail as much as they need to, because failure is a normal part of healthy development and kids need it in order to grow.
yes, and I'm so glad you threw in those few words over there, saying that it's well-meaning, and we love our kids, and we want them to be able to succeed and do A, B, and C. but we also have to learn love means sometimes not doing something. And I'm preaching to the choir here, knowing that I want my kids to succeed, and they also have to see things for themselves. I have to bite my lip. I can't answer back. I can't do certain things because they have to see that if I'm going to get involved, then I'm doing it for them, and they're not doing it for themselves. So I think that's something that is so important for us to be able to say. Part of my love is to restrict myself from getting involved, and that could be really, really, really hard because we love our kids and we want to be able to do so much for them. So I'm so glad you said that because I think it goes so far that of the growth happens through that breaking, falling, failing, and there's so much to be learned from that, which I think has been one of the biggest problems with those second place trophies in a certain way. And I'm not saying people that are coming to second place in a tournament shouldn't get a trophy, but I think overall the concept of seeing that yes, there's you didn't win this time and you'll try it again next time. It's not about you also get something. I'm happy you were here. I'm happy you spent the whole day doing this and you didn't win. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. It was a great experience. How are you going to use this to go forward? It's something we talk about in my office is being able to have an overall motto of what am I doing today that's better than yesterday, and how am I preparing for tomorrow that's better than today. So and I don't think that question really has an answer because it's really about the question and it's about creating that sense of meaning, which I know is something that you're a very big advocate about. Anyone I think that's in the field and you and I are both in really have to have a sense of meaning and creating that. And I'm curious, how do you go about teaching that both to teenagers and also to parents when it comes to creating meaning for themselves so that they can go about doing the things that are right and healthy for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for parents, in our well-meaning of wanting to give our kids all the opportunities possible and create the best lives for themselves and make sure they're learning all the things, I think sometimes we forget that kids intuitively will be drawn to and pursue the things that are going to give them meaning. But sometimes in our efforts to do it for them, we don't give them the opportunity to figure that out for themselves, or we don't trust them to figure it out for themselves. Or maybe there's times in our lives where we all need to go through a season of like the lull in order, or the boredom, in order to find the inspiration for the next right thing that we're supposed to be doing. And sometimes we see our kids in a little bit of a lull or in a season where they're kind of like floundering and searching for that next right thing. And we're so quick to throw options to them or to sign them up for things or whatever that we forget that sometimes they need to discover that for themselves. Sometimes they need the space and the time to do that. And we need to listen to them because they often will be drawn to the right things for them that we might not have chosen for them. And we, as parents, have to remember that they are individual human beings that are autonomous and separate from us. Especially the older they get, the more they have to take that autonomy, in age appropriate steps. They have to take that autonomy and they have to be given opportunities to make some choices. And again, some of them we might be like, that is not a good idea, but we have to let them try it,
We have to
because it
bite our
might
lip.
be through trying it for them to figure out like, oh, you're right, that wasn't a good idea. But they wouldn't have listened to us if we had just
Oh
told them.
yeah.
They have to try it, find that out for themselves that it's not, and that those are opportunities to pivot.
Yes, yeah, very, very well said. And I think when we allow them to do that, it sort of lets them see, okay, so what did I learn from this? I know I saved the money to buy a violin, but I'm realizing what it's going to take for me to do this. I got to do something that's a little easier and something that's, I could do in like a group setting with other people to learn. And okay, fine. So I wasn't able to do what I wanted, but I can try something else. And there's always another option. Our God as parents, and the way I talk about it in my office a lot when dealing with a lot of teenagers and young adults, is the goal of parents and what we're doing throughout our entire life is for our kids is creating these little, call them jewelry boxes of little tidbits of amazing things that we're trying to give them. And throughout their life, they're getting more and more and more and more of these little boxes. And they're creating a room full of these things throughout their lifetime. All of a sudden, when they come of age of being independent and autonomy, teenager years, whatever you want to call it, there's a certain sense of like, hey, I can open this front door and I can do certain things. And they're like, okay, so let me pack up everything from here. And they try going out the front door. They realize not everything's going to fit. And they have this big bag where everything is in, and the bag's not going out of the door. The job of the parents then is to stand by that front door, put their hands out, and watch the kid as they take out little boxes of jewelry and put it onto their hands. And as they try getting out the door, they realize no, it's still not small enough, and they keep on putting little jewelry boxes there. And then what happens is over time they're like, oh, okay, I can go. But then they leave the house. They go 100 feet. They're like, oh my god, this bag is heavy, and they have to go back and give some more. And then what happens over time is as they can go further and further down the road of their independence, they might like, you know what am I going to do in this situation? Let me go get one of those jewelry boxes I have for my parents. The role of the parents is to make sure that they're standing by the door so that the kids can always come back to it. The way I like talking about it is creating and harboring a situation where we create a world of, I can't wait to tell my parents, as opposed to, my parents can't find this out. And I think that's something that's lifelong. And when we're talking about whether it's technology, which is a big part of our conversation today, but yet also when it comes to, I think, any sort of failure that they might have, and resilience that we're trying to teach them, and modeling, which is such a big part of what we do. I think that another big thing to talk about, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on this as we're getting to our time limit over here, but I'm curious to hear about the concept of teaching, the concept of being valuable. And we make mistakes too as adults. How is that something that we can teach in a very healthy and, I guess you could say, proper way, without it being something where a parent is blowing up and saying, I messed up, and then storming out of the room? How can that be something that we can teach and give over in a very healthy way?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what you just said, like modeling, it's the most important, which means that we have to be okay with when we fail. And I think being really honest with kids, because I think I think it's becoming more acceptable now, but I know in generations past, it was not, like, failure was not okay. And if you did fail, you would hide it from your kids or from your family because you need to appear infallible and like you have everything all figured out. But I think it's really important for kids to see that their parents make mistakes too, and to let them in on the process. Like, I'm really going for this promotion. I'm having to work a little bit extra for it and show that I have the skills that it takes. And then if it doesn't happen, showing them a healthy way of handling it, which is like, I'm really, really disappointed. I think maybe tonight I just need to eat a bunch of ice cream, but then getting up the next day and moving through and knowing that, and showing them and talking, having conversations like, my value isn't based on one promotion or one test or one audition or whatever the one thing is. Our inherent value is in who we are as a person, not in any one thing we do. And I think that our kids are watching those things, and that they are going to be more comfortable coming to us with their failures if they've seen us be gentle and forgiving of ourselves and them in previous situations.
Yeah, very well said. And I think that honesty is really, really important over here. So I have one last important question for you, just to sort of try to give us a vision of what things can look like when we talk a lot about technology, and if it's something that's not going away anytime soon. I'm curious, when we talk about the future of families and what that looks like regarding a healthy balance between technology, between outdoors, and the physical world in general. What does it look like to you? And what do you see down the road for there being the most optimal and healthy thriving of living? And what roles do us as parents and educators and leaders need to play when it comes to doing what's right for our kids?
I think that all of us and our society in general is coming to the point where we're realizing that we all have an overusage or perhaps even addiction to our screens. And I think that our kids are smart and intuitive and sometimes more tapped into their, sometimes a little bit more tapped into their intuition. And that as a society, there is going to be, starting with conversations like this, there is going to be more of a movement to just be really, really intentional with our technology usage. I think that as AI comes in and really changes the job landscapes, that those of us that are raising kids in intentional environments where we are present with each other and where we are giving each other that gift of being fully engaged, and we're raising our kids to have skills that are physical and in person, that those jobs and those relationships will never be able to be replaced. The things that are high touch and the people that know how to engage and know how to have a conversation, and dialogue with eye contact and good social emotional skills.
Authentic conversation
Authentic
and
conversations
connection.
and being our, I think authenticity is going to
Mm.
be a value that is going to be sought for in a world that is
Yes.
increasingly and like ever increasingly becoming more and more dominated by technology. And so
Yeah.
I think we're going to see the pendulum swing a little bit the other way of high value on the high touch interpersonal communication, and that parents who realize that, the sooner they realize that and the sooner they can really just be intentional. That doesn't mean not using technology. It means just being intentional with technology, with the way they're parenting and having it in their homes, the more benefits and advantages they're going to give their kids for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I think that that authentic connection and that authenticity is going to be so important. So very very well said, and I think that's something that as a parent I can hope to aspire, and I aspire to, and hopefully people that are listening to this can pick up something from here when we talk about the concept of there are so many challenges, and there are so many different things that are going to come up, and it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. And be honest and be open and be authentic, and that's going to be something that's going to be really really helpful. Kristen, I can't thank you enough, I think, for having this awesome conversation. This was not pre-planned, because I know a lot of things that you talk about here are things that we talked about in this podcast on the importance of that open communication and the like. But I'm so glad we had this opportunity, because I think there are so many refreshing things when it dealing with teenagers. I'm curious
Thank
where
you
people
so
can
much.
find more about you, and how can we get to have more contact if people want it.
Yeah, sure. So I run adventure camps for teenagers that are tech free, where kids can do immersive adventures and build connections with their peers, and do integrative adventures. And you can find those at teenconnectadventures.com. And I have a parent blog on there where I talk about this and a lot of these topics that are sort of related to this, specifically about parenting teens. So I encourage people to check it out. It's at teenconnectadventures.com.
And we will have all of these links in the show notes. Kirsten, it's been an absolute pleasure. When we like finishing off with some rapid fire questions over here, I'm curious if there is a book or a podcast you would recommend that people can listen to, get more information. Anything other than something that you've been a part of. What would you recommend?
I really, really love, so I'm going to recommend two things. I really, really loved the book that came out last year, The Anxious Generation by
Okay.
Jonathan Haidt.
Jonathan Haidt.
That was a big part of my research project that I did last year when I was writing my book. And then Brene Brown did a series in her podcast last year called Living Beyond Human Scale. And it wasn't specific to teenagers, but as a parent of teenagers and raising young people in a world of technology, it was about 11 episodes that was talking specifically about our human usage of technology, how fast it's moving, and how it seems to be growing beyond our capacity to be able to really fathom and process, and what that looks like
Cool.
ethically for the usage. And she went into different aspects of AI and facial recognition, and lots and lots of different aspects for just from a really really thoughtful, a really thoughtful way.
Okay, so that's something maybe if we have opportunity, if we're allowed to, we'll try to post one or two links from both the book and also from Brene Brown's podcast. Kirsten, if you could think of anyone in history that you would like to have brunch with that's not alive and not a relative, who would that be?
I don't. Oh my gosh. um, well, this probably will seem a little bit silly, but I'm a big fan of Jane Austen. And I love her. I've grown up loving her novels, and I love the way her brain works, and a lot of the just very clever, thought provoking things that she incorporated into her novels. And I think that she would be a fabulous conversationalist to have brunch with.
Oh, that sounds really cool. That's awesome. That's original answer to this podcast. So that's thank you for that. And I'm curious if you can think of a everyday mundane superpower that you would like to have as a mom. What would that be?
Oh, an everyday mundane superpower. I think that if I could be present, like divide myself or multiply myself rather, and be present in more than one place at a time, like be able to take all of my kids on a one-on-one get out date, at the same time, and not have to fill up 5 afternoons a week doing something like that. That would be great, so that I could give my one-on-one attention to more things.
That's awesome. Okay, that's a great answer. I approve. Kristen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.